many of you listening today are experiencing stress, anxiety, or depression. Maybe it's all of them. Some of you have hit a wall of major burnout, whether it's a demanding job, feeling overwhelmed with financial issues, burdened with many responsibilities. This is the show you can't afford to miss. Julia walks us through her personal experience and provides you with real insight on how you can pick yourself back up and live a healthier life. This is Julia's story. This is the highway to healing. All right, beautiful. I am excited to speak with you today, Julia. Thanks for being on the show.
Yes, it's my pleasure. Hi, Dallisa.
Yeah, I was recently on your podcast, so it's great to be able to be on each other's shows. I am intrigued by your story, your background, because you went through burnout. And I know that a lot of people listening to this episode today have been in that point in their life. Maybe it's not today, but they could recognize parts of themselves in your story. So let's just start from the beginning. Let's talk about your own dealings with burnout, and then we'll get into what you're doing now and how that can help our listeners. So tell us your story. Yes. Where does it start?
Sounds good. Yeah. So first of all, just for people to reference my accent, because they're probably wondering where I'm from. I grew up in Germany for the first 18, 19 years of my life. And then over the last over 10 years now, I've been traveling in different countries for work and also for college. And I worked for Google for 7.5 years, both in Dublin, Ireland. That's where I started. And then in Mountain View, California, which is obviously the Silicon Valley and the headquarters of Google. And I experienced my own personal burnout in the summer of 2018. And I was honestly really, really surprised when I got diagnosed, because I knew that something was going on, but I didn't really know what it was until I talked with my doctor. So I'm really glad that I actually went to go and see my doctor. But maybe backtrack that a little bit, right? Why did I burn out? I was really surprised about my burnout because I consider myself a really active, physically active and healthy person. So I was always working out on a regular basis, eating pretty healthy. And and then I think it all started with kind of my commute. So Bay Area traffic is pretty awful. If people listen now that are used to Silicon Valley, they can totally relate to this, at least pre-COVID. I don't know how it is now, and I haven't lived in the Bay Area now for 2 years, but I commuted for 3 years between Silicon Valley and Lake Tahoe, where that's my permanent home today. And I've wanted to make it my permanent home for many years. And I commuted 2,000 miles a month by myself, usually at night because of the traffic, in order to spend my weekends here. And at the same time, I was also managing a huge global project for Google as a project and program manager. And I had a lot of late night meetings, a lot of things during the day. And I just started to see a couple of different things, like I just felt constantly overwhelmed. I constantly felt very anxious, which obviously had some effects on my digestion and just how I felt overall health-wise. But I always say the biggest sign for me that I didn't really feel like that something was what going on was that I didn't feel like myself anymore. I just felt like I was constantly grumpy. I took things way too personally, both at work when emails came in, but also in my personal life, getting constantly in fights with my partners. And and then it's kind of, I always say burnout, really, really important, is not something that happens overnight. It's also not something that happens from 1 month to another. It's something that really is an accumulated just an accumulated amounts of stress that at some point add up and just make you burn out. And and in 2018, in the summer of 2018, all of these things happened, right? I was commuting already at the time 2.5 years. And I had that global project. I had a lot of India meetings because I was working with an India team. And I just was here during the weekend here in Lake Tahoe, and I was talking to a friend, and I just said to her, I feel not like myself, and I don't know what I'm doing anymore. And I just decided to take a few days off. And during that time, I also decided to go and see a doctor because I had never had any mental health issues. And I didn't really know what it meant to have mental health issues. But I went to see a doctor and they gave me 2 different questionnaires, one with regards to anxiety and one with regards to depression. And while I was filling out the survey, I was really, really surprised and shocked to how many answers I could say yes, or this is happening to me almost daily. And so once I went in to see the doctor and talk to the doctor, they basically told me that I have severe anxiety and depression. And I was like, wow, really? That's it's kind of shocking because I feel like I've always been a balanced person, but something must have happened over the last couple of months and even years that I got to this point. And I'm going to stop here for a second.
Yeah. Wow. I know I'm listening to this and it's interesting because I think there are a lot of people listening that would say, yeah, I have felt overwhelmed, or I felt detached, or I felt confused. I think people listening right now today are in that state of mind, at least some of them. So they're probably nodding their heads as they're listening to this thing. Gosh, yeah, I've been there. So I appreciate you sharing that backstory because it really led to you starting your peak performance method company. And so bridge that gap for us. So you find out that you are suffering with anxiety and depression. Then how do you go from that point in your life where you may feel like you're in a dark cave, and how do you take that and move that into your company peak performance method?
Yeah, good question. So I decided to take a 3 months medical leave because I really didn't know where to start and what to do. And I just thought to myself, okay, I have to just kind of get out and recollect myself. And so it was really interesting because the first month, I feel like I had almost more anxiety than before because I guess I was more aware of it, right? I started to listen more to the signals and symptoms of my body and my mind. And, oftentimes they say as well, when you stop and when you start taking time to think of what's been going on, you actually start recognizing and realizing, wow, okay, I've actually put my system through a lot of things. And then I got really fascinated about stress management. So backstory as well, I've always been really interested in psychology. I actually took a sports psychology degree in Dublin while I was working at Google. And I was always really fascinated, both physically and mentally. But mental health didn't really come into my life until 2018 when I experienced it myself, the importance of taking care of my mental health. And so I learned a lot about stress management. I learned about obviously burnout. What does it mean? How is burnout related to anxiety and depression? Because burnout isn't really a diagnosable disease at this point, which is why they just say you have anxiety and depression. And then I got just super interested in this space. And I actually went to a 3-day stress management seminar in Germany during that time that my sister invited me to. And my sister actually knew the coach, so the facilitator and the trainer that was facilitating the training. And I just thought, wow, this is so cool. Like, this is so interesting. And he had a very strong psychology background. So he actually studied psychology in school. So he was never in a corporate setting. So I felt very connected to some of his messaging. And at the same time, I felt like there was a really important piece missing, which I had experienced coming from the corporate world. And so when I got back after my 3 months medical leave, I actually had kind of a slow start because, they just gave me time actually to reintegrate at work after 3 months. But also it was in December and I was a project and program manager. So they just didn't have any new projects assigned to me yet. So I had a little bit of time to just get accustomed again and also just offer the things that I had learned over that period of time to the people that I worked with, and extended obviously that invitation as well to other people that would just be interested in learning more about stress. And the response was really overwhelming. I remember I sent an email to an internal email thread and offered a stress management training. And I think in in less than 3 days, I had over 300 or 400 responses from people worldwide that were like, I can relate to this. I would be really interested to take your workshop. So I offered an internal workshop. I really enjoyed doing that. And then at the same time, I also realized that I really had to make a decision in my own life, because I felt always really torn between my two lives of, being in Silicon Valley during the week and then being in the mountains during the weekend. And at the time, my fiance was here in Lake Tahoe as well. And so I just felt really torn all the time. And so when I went back to work, I actually realized really quickly that I really quickly got back into severe anxiety. And I just was like, okay, I have to make a decision, because this lifestyle is just not the right lifestyle anymore. And at the same time, obviously, I got super passionate about sharing with other people what it meant to take care of yourself. And so, so I made the really, really difficult decision after 7.5 years to leave a very secure and safe environment to start my own business and to help more people beyond Google to help realize how to sustain performance and prevent burnout.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
What do you say to people, though, that maybe they're afraid to take time off from work to do the deeper dive, or maybe they don't have the insight yet on, if they would want to start their own business or cutting back at work, or maybe they feel that they are stretched to the limits with what they can financially do and not do. What do you tell people that say, oh yeah, it's easy for Julia to do that, but there's just no way that I can? Are there any like first steps or tips that you give to people to say, hey, maybe here's where you can start?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. So yes, the answer to burnout is definitely not always leaving your job. I think it was, obviously more like a personal career choice and life choice for me. But I work with a lot of people that are experiencing burnout in their job and that love their job, but they just need to learn better habits in order to manage the stress levels that they're experiencing on a day-to-day basis. So if people can't take time off, which is also totally okay, I think the most important part to realize is that you need to create new habits, because the habits that have gotten you to the point of burnout are obviously not working. So I think it's really, really important to almost do at the beginning just an analysis of what is not working. What am I actually doing? And so one of the first things that I do with my clients, and that I just obviously share as well with the people that are following me, is to do a kind of a check-in on timing. So time management is a huge piece, and it is part of the peak performance method, which is a 9 piece or 9 sessions method basically that I created in order to help sustain performance over time. But when you're starting to track your time and you see where you spend your time and how much you do for yourself versus at your job and how many hours you're working, it gives you a really good idea of, okay, this is just my status quo of what is happening right now. And then you can start basically identifying maybe 1 or 2 areas that actually lead you to feeling burned out. So that would be probably the first step I would advise people to do. You don't have to take time off. A lot of people also think they just take time off, they recover for a week or 2, right? They're going on a vacation, and then they come back and they think they're just going to be magically better, but they haven't changed any of their habits. So really, really the most important piece of when you're experiencing even just signs and symptoms of burnout is to do a status quo check-in, see what is working and what is not working, and really thinking about what new habits can I develop in order to actually support myself.
Yeah, it's a great point, because once you're taking the inventory, you really realize
Mm-hmm.
whoa,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that I was spending that much time doing this or that. And when you have it in black and white terms and you write it down, it's amazing what you discover in that process. So I love that tip. You've
Yeah.
also mentioned to me that you have a special morning routine.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd love for you to share what it is that you do during that morning routine. And also, if you wouldn't mind explaining how you found the time or why you've made it a priority, because I know that, again, the people listening might say, oh, well, it's easy for you to do that. You don't have 5 kids or work 2 jobs or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is, right? So,
Yes.
so walk us through your morning routine and
Yeah.
how people can start to implement their own.
Yeah. So I actually started my morning routine during my medical leave. That's when I realized, okay, right, that's where I did my status quo, and I was like, okay, there are certain things that are not working for me. And one of the biggest realizations was that the first thing I did in the morning was roll over, take my phone from my nightstand and check messages, right? Check messages from my family overseas and my friends overseas, but also check messages and emails from my teams that I was working with at the time. And I would basically get up already feeling stressed and anxious because I had already things on my mind that had to get done. And oftentimes also in a rush because I would always obviously spend too much time going through my phone, and then I would have really little time for me and myself, and just rush through getting ready and going to work. So that was a really big realization for me that wasn't a helpful pattern. And so I developed my morning routine, and it was really challenging at the beginning because I remember I actually started my morning routine while I was on a yoga retreat. And so the yoga retreat was, I don't remember, probably from 9 to 6 or something like that. And I really wanted to make sure that I get my morning routine in before that. So I would actually get up at 6 or 6:30 in the morning to do all of the things that I'm going to tell you that I started doing. But it was a struggle at the beginning, right? Because I had to learn that I have to go to bed earlier in order to actually have time for my morning routine and not struggle to get up in the morning, right? Those are some really interesting learnings when you start integrating and implementing a morning routine. But what I did was that I got up in the morning and I was really strict with myself to not look at my phone until the things that I had on my morning routine list were accomplished. So I would get up, leave my phone on my bedside table, and then get a warm glass of lemon water, go downstairs, and then write in my journal, just write things down that happened the previous day, and also practice gratitude. And that usually took me 30 to 45 minutes. And then I would kind of allow myself to check my phone next. But even just that moment of self-reflection and taking a moment to just kind of start the day in a more calm way made me feel accomplished in a way, because I did things for myself, but also re-energized and recharged because I had time to spend with myself before I actually gave the energy out to other people. And it's really interesting, the second part of the question that you asked me about how can people start a morning routine. And I just talked about this with my group because I have a group coaching group that I'm working with every week. And we talked about morning routines last week. And one of the participants said something really powerful, which I think is really important, because when people follow me on social media and they see what I do for my morning routine, they are like, oh wow, like she's doing all these different things. Okay, I have to do, I should do all of these things in order to also have this kind of a start to the day, right? Which creates a lot of pressure and expectations, which might not be things that work for you. So I always say, when you start a routine, it doesn't even have to be a morning routine. If you are super busy parents, for example, do an evening routine. Find things that work for you and find things, just be flexible with the things that you do in your life, right? Just because people have morning routines doesn't mean that a morning routine works for you. Maybe you do a midday routine, or you do a routine after you brought your kids to school, or you do an evening routine after you brought your kids to bed. The most important part is that you're doing something for yourself to recharge really mindfully, and that you do something that you really enjoy doing. So as I mentioned, I really enjoy journaling. I love writing, and it really helps me with my thoughts because I have a lot of thoughts. And so it helps me really structure them. And it really makes me feel a lot lighter after I wrote them down. But some people don't like journaling, and that's totally okay. So maybe you choose to go for a walk, or you choose to take a bubble bath, or you choose to read a book, or you choose to make a nice cup of tea and look outside the window. I've heard so many things over the last 2 years from people. It really doesn't matter as long as you do something that you enjoy, and nobody else has to enjoy that. I think that's the most important way to start a routine.
Yeah, it's beautiful because they can customize it to what works for them.
Yeah.
They don't, like you said, they don't have to do what you do or what other
Yeah.
people are doing. It's about finding what works and then actually doing it and sticking with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. You had mentioned that you love a book called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard of this book
Mm.
before. And so I'd love for you to tell people why you like that book, because a lot of the audience members are looking for different books or
Yeah.
resources. So why did you like this one?
Oh my God, I'm so glad that you're bringing this up. Okay, so super good book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Dr. Joe Dispenza. I integrate a lot of neuroscience in the teachings that I have, and Dr. Joe Dispenza is a neuroscientist, and he has an amazing story about how he healed himself in the 80s and when he had a really bad car accident. And basically people said, he has to take medication for the rest of his life, and he needs to undergo really complex spinal surgery. And he at the time was a PT and decided, after consulting a lot of different doctors and friends, that he's not going to go through surgery because it didn't really, like, he knew that with surgery and seeing surgery patients himself, that it wouldn't be a great option. So he really believed in the connection between body and mind, and he believed that you can heal yourself. And it's absolutely fascinating. And so he was able, through thought, because he basically said that all he did was helping his body to heal itself by going through step by step the surgery that he would have undergone through. Um, but he didn't have the surgery. He just basically imagined it in his mind, right, of what they would do in order to fix his spine. And after 6 to 8 weeks, he started to see he started to see results. He obviously went through different meditations and things like that. And obviously all of people's the doctors and everyone's minds were blown away, because they gave him 6 months to not even be able to walk, and I think he started to walk again after 8 weeks. Anyway, he has a super fascinating personal story, but then he started to do a lot of research, because he basically promised himself that if he would be able to heal himself, that he will dedicate his life to helping other people understand the connection between body and mind from a neuroscientific perspective. So he studied neuroscience, and he's written so many amazing books. He's doing a lot of workshops and seminars with people about how to create that body mind connection and how to rewire the brain. And so Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, the book, is basically about exactly that process. It's actually 2 parts. The first part of the book talks about how to rewire the brain, what kind of effect also stress has on our body, and how, because of the thoughts that we have, because stress is produced by thought alone, how we are holding specific patterns in our bodies as well, and how to break through them, how to literally rewire the brain in order to heal yourself, no matter if it's physically or spiritually, emotionally. And then the second part of the book is really more of a step-by-step guide of how to start those specific meditations that he's basically leading in order to start rewiring your brain. And it's super, super powerful. I think there's different ways of how other people describe it, right? Like manifestation, right? How to put out in the world what you want to see, and how to already connect to it from a just from a feeling, right? How do you want to feel? He basically talks about how you then attract that energy back to you, because he talks about the quantum field, and he talks about quantum physics and neuroscience and the connection of all of these things. So yeah, super great book, and highly recommend it. Also, even just Googling or looking on YouTube for Dr. Joe Dispenza and watching one of his videos, absolutely fascinating and mind-blowing for me.
I can tell that you're a big fan.
Yeah.
I love it. I think there's going to be people that are going to go buy that book right after they get done
Yeah.
listening to this episode. So it's a perfect tip for everybody out there.
Right.
Okay, so before we leave you today, Julia, is there any last words of wisdom or insight that you want to give people listening that maybe feel the impact of the stress or they feel on the verge of a burnout? What would you say to those people that are listening?
Yeah. I would say that they need to start now. I think the biggest mistake I see people make is that they are often waiting until, things are starting to be really severe. And obviously, we're human beings and we're sometimes lazy and we don't actually do something until it hurts us in a way, either physically or mentally, right? So much that we are actually more motivated to change something than to remain in the same kind of space. But one of the biggest things I've really learned, and one of the biggest missions I have for myself and my company, is that people need to start now. You don't start to learn new habits when you're starting or when you are already burnt out, right? No matter if you're listening now and you say, oh yeah, I already have a lot of stress in my life, then that's a good realization. And that's the time where you should start really taking action. Don't wait until it gets worse before you do something. And how to get started. I really believe in this nine-step process, right? I built the peak performance method for exactly that reason, because I really believe that all of these 9 components that are part of the peak performance method are really, really important to sustain performance over time. And the 3 dimensions are basically focusing on mindfulness, on productivity, and on leadership, because sometimes when we think about stress management, we think about, oh yeah, I should do more meditation, or I should do more yoga. But it's not going to be the answer. It will help you, of course, in the short run to feel a bit better, right? When you practice self-care, that always helps. But there's things that you need to change in your life in order to sustain it. So time management, setting boundaries, how to do that, those are all really, really important components that need to be looked at when you're starting to feel the effects of stress and burnout. So just get started. Don't wait until it's too late. And if you know anyone that is showing effects of stress, tell them that they should be looking into their habits and what is going well for them and what is maybe not working for them anymore.
Beautiful. I couldn't agree more. I'm so thrilled that we were able to have this discussion today. You put some things and reminders into my pathway. And so I appreciate your time and your talent. Thank you for joining us, Julia.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
For more information on Julia, her company Peak Performance Method, or her podcast Stressed, visit peakperformancemethod.com. Stories like this one are important to tell. It reminds us that even during the darkest times, we can always find light. We can always choose faith over fear. For exclusive content, please join my Spark Plug members-only community and apply to be a guest on this show. Find out more at spiritandspark.com.